A parent's worst nightmare.
I just ran and I dropped to my knees.
On a dark Florida night, 14-year-old Wendy Hudakoc sneaks out of her bedroom window and never returns.
I was like, I'm never gonna see her again.
2 decades later, the mystery of what happened to Wendy haunts everyone who loved her.
What's the most frustrating about this?
Not knowing. 20 years is a long time.
I lost my best friend, my only sister.
When Wendy Hudakoc's mom, Shelley, moved her and sister Charlene to Naples, Florida, it was all to build a new life, centered around a new stepdad, Dan Campbell.
I heard that you ran a pretty tight ship, strict household.
I might be accused of that. Her mother and I shared a lot of common beliefs, and so it was easy as a step-parent to come into the family and, join with rules that maybe were already there or already in place, and, it just worked. It really did.
Like any other father-daughter relationship, Dan and his beautiful young stepdaughter forged a special bond.
What is Wendy's personality like?
Fun-loving, outgoing, happy-go-lucky. One of the things she said is nothing bad ever happens to us.
Wendy said that.
Yeah, Wendy said that.
Wendy's older sister had her own unique bond with her sweet little sis.
How would you describe her?
Book smart, not street smart. She was a lot of fun, full of life, very curious, very, still finding her way though. She was only 14, so.
An all-American girl with typical interests from sports to boys.
Does she have a boyfriend? Was she boy crazy?
Boy crazy, yes. A boyfriend, as far as 14-year-olds go, there were a couple people that, she was, interested in, maybe have a crush over. She was still, emotionally fairly young.
And like any teenager, a bit defiant.
She was more of a rule breaker than I ever was.
It's Saturday in November. Dan and Wendy's mom, Shelley, have plans to travel across the state to an overnight conference.
I wasn't going to have a 16-year-old watching a 14-year-old by themselves in the house. So one of my coworkers, she was there, and I believe her boyfriend was there as well. And Shar had a friend over, a friend who was basically like a third child, Shauna. So, she was always over, and so it was a normal weekend. I had no reason to be concerned.
We had sitters, we had curfews, we had where we were and weren't allowed to go and with who, and we knew the rules.
But young Wendy has her own plans after the parents leave.
She would test the boundaries far more than I ever did. She was very rebellious in that fashion where she was gonna try. She was definitely gonna push to test those limits.
That night, the telephone rings and Wendy takes a call.
Then it was after 9 o'clock. We weren't allowed to have phone calls after 9 o'clock.
Wendy sets up a ride to a friend's party with her mystery caller, then invites Charlene and her friend Shauna to join her.
She kept saying, it's gonna be fun, come on guys. And we were kind of thinking, we're 16, you guys are 14. Like, why are we gonna go to some 14-year-old party where there's a bunch of 14-year-olds hanging out?
She spent a fair amount of time trying to convince Shauna or I to go to this party with her. She didn't want to go alone. And I was like, no, if you get caught, it's your bye. And that was the last words I said to her.
After bedtime, away from the watchful eyes of her babysitters, Wendy Hudakoc climbs out of her bedroom window to meet her ride. But the next morning, Wendy's big sister Charlene makes an unnerving discovery.
I walked into her room the next morning and I had expected to find her asleep, and I didn't. And the window was wide open, bed still made, and my heart and stomach kind of switched spots for a minute.
Luckily, Charlene recalls that Wendy had taken their stepfather's pager.
I'm paging her repeatedly over and over because the night before she said, I'm taking Dan's pager. So if page me, I will either be home or call you within 10 minutes.
But Wendy doesn't answer.
She wasn't answering and she wasn't answering, and I waited probably a good couple of hours at that point, just repeatedly paging her, blowing up that pager, get home, get home, get home, get home, get home.
pages soon turned to panic.
It was probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours later that I started to try and get a hold of my parents because I freaked out.
Across the state, Wendy and Charlene's parents receive a call they will never forget.
We were at the hotel desk, and the lady said, "I think your daughter's on the phone." That's how we found out Wendy didn't come home the night before.
What was in your mind at that moment?
Just to get home. Nothing was in our mind except for to get home.
But for Wendy's family, home will never be the same. Next, who was Wendy's mystery ride? Investigators soon learned who was last seen with the pretty teen.
How would you describe him?
Unorganized, confused, delusional at times.
But was he a killer?
Did you believe his story? I dropped her off.
He's lying through his teeth.
When you called the police, what did you say to them? How did you describe the situation?
Apparently they thought she was a runaway because they classified her that way to begin with.